As you may be aware, I have already done a 5 overrated albums of 2017, but just because it was so fun doing it last time and I want to be even more controversial this time around, I've decided to do a 5 more overrated albums of 2017 because the year is filled with so many albums that just 5 couldn't really cut it. I think there are many albums I felt have been quite overrated in 2017, so 5 more here feel like they are necessary and worthy of being putting on the list. Yes, you might not agree with me. Yes, it's my opinion, I guess. So you may be pissed off, you may not really like it, but I don't know, I like doing these kind of lists. They're so fun to do, and I like throwing in curveball opinions that get people thinking about what your hot take is on a certain album that everyone else may love. It's just a lot of fun. The lighting is a bit dodgy right now, I apologise for that. There is sun shining directly on my face. But I'm going to start this list with Kendrick Lamar's Damn. Yes, Kendrick Lamar's Damn. Simultaneously being the most critically acclaimed album of the year, whilst being the most overrated album of the year. And the thing is with this album that's kind of starting to become quite funny is that even the people that love this album are coming out and saying it's an overrated album. And a shout out to Brad Taste in Music, I know he said it in his best albums of the year video, and I've seen a few others say it too. Back when this channel started, very early in April 2017, this album actually had just come out, so I did quite a lengthy review of the album then. I'd recommend not watching it though, it was pretty shit. I was very early on in my reviewing days, but even back then, when the album came out, I said what all the fans were moaning about, and I had addressed this by saying, look, I didn't go into Damn expecting To Pimp a Butterfly. I didn't go into Damn expecting Good Kid, Mad City. That was not what I expected. I don't think people honestly did. The thing with the album is that the lead single was Humble, one of his most poppiest, trendiest sounding songs to date, which actually I think is a great song and a great pop rap track that came out in 2017 and blew up like crazy. But hearing that song first, that would be a telltale sign that this wasn't going to be another To Pimp a Butterfly or Good Kid, Mad City. So that wasn't even on my mind when going into Damn. So that I already dismissed from all the Kendrick stans that are like, oh, it doesn't have to be like a big concept story, it can just be a good album. Yeah, it can, and I'm fine with that. But I just wasn't anticipating some of his worst songs on this album. Like, I can't believe so many people defend tracks like God, you know, which has a really bad hook. Yeah, which has a really redundant hook. Yeah. Like, I can't help but think of it as being a lazy attempt from Kendrick, which is not something I've ever really thought of saying about him, to be honest. I still hate Loyalty. I think that 24 Karat Magic sample is really awful. I think it's so hashed and just done in such a bad way. Like, 24 Karat Magic is a great fun song, but the way it's incorporated as a sample, I think was done so poorly. Like, I can't hear that song and enjoy it, as well as Love. I think the singing from Zachary on Love is weak. So there's 4 songs, a good 4 songs on the album that I just can't get with. And the opening track is just like an introduction. So that's like 5 out of like however many that I just don't care for. I think the one thing I can say that's positive about this album is that it has some amazing songs like Duckworth, Triple X, DNA. And the other positive thing I want to mention as well is that I like that Kendrick Lamar took this route, because I think he was getting to a point where he was getting worried about his persona, you know? Everyone looks at Kendrick and asks, you know, like expects answers from him, asks him for all the solutions. And I think this album was his way of saying, look, you know, I can't be that guy all the time, so I'm going to go down this route and do something a bit more accessible and less conceptual, which I really like from him. I do really like that. But it just came through with some really weak pop rap songs that I will never enjoy. Even a month ago, I returned to this album hoping that I would enjoy it even more, and it just wore off of me actually even more than it did when it initially came out, to be honest. So yeah, I don't understand how people call this album of the year. I won't understand how people call this hip hop album of the year, and even some are saying it's his best album to date. It definitely has some of his weakest songs on here. I think in a few years we'll look back on it and even recognize that, because he'll probably drop his next project maybe 2018, 2019 and blow Damn out of the water, and then I think people will look at Damn in a lesser light. That's what I'm expecting anyway. Big Thief on the list next with Capacity. Have barely anything to say about this one, honestly. I found this incredibly dull and boring, and yet it's made many year-end lists, and I just don't get why. It's a very simple indie project that, you know, is very like bedroomy. It's very soft and nice on the ears, I guess, but I've heard too much of this type of music to even care about it, so I don't know what's different about Big Thief that deserves their like high placing on so many year-end lists I've seen. Not really getting this one. I don't really know the hype. I don't even think that many people who are watching this video will have heard of it or heard the album, but I've seen it around. I just don't get it, so I thought I'd throw it on here because it is quite high on a lot of lists, and I'm just thinking it's been done 100 times before over the past 2 or 3 years, and every time it's done it's still kind of boring, so I don't know, I just don't get it. My next pick is an album that isn't technically an album, but I am very shocked that I even have to include it on an overrated albums of 2017 list, because I just didn't think anyone was going to include it on their year-end list. Like, I just thought, nah, this is widely considered a weak album from him. Most people have started to accept that his best work came earlier in the decade, and now he's kind of becoming less interesting as an artist and putting out the same boring, mediocre material, and that is Drake's More Life. Now, this was a playlist. He released this and said this was a playlist, so by that metric you kind of have to look at this at a different angle and think, okay, it's a playlist, so this is a sort of album that you pick and choose songs from. You don't really need to listen to it all the way through to consume it that way. It's just more for the kind of background party tracks that have a dancehall reggae tinge to them, kind of smooth sounding, but it's not really an album as he announced that. So why is this boring album on so many year-end lists? All the publications have like jizzed over this album. I'm sure even when it came out, no one really gave it that much hype either. Like, it was just kind of like a few days later after it had been released, people were like, yeah, it's a mediocre Drake album. He's not put a great album out since like Nothing Was the Same. People have just kind of accepted that. But all the year-end lists are like, oh god, we need to put him on here because it's Drake. We need to carry on sucking his dick and giving him all the support. We just gotta do it. We gotta do it, guys. Oh. No. It's not good. It's boring. It's like over an hour long. It's unnecessarily long. It has Fake Love on here, which is like one of his worst singles ever. Like, I think it's just wildly considered by his fans as one of his weakest projects. I mean, Views was terrible, but I think More Life wasn't that much of a step up, honestly, in terms of quality of music. It was okay at best, but still didn't have much to grab your interest. Again, it's not even technically an album, so I think it's honestly one of those albums that will kind of throw Drake under the bus for his career, unless he comes out with something really great next time or really massive single like One Dance. But this is kind of the one that sort of like pushed him down, and he's sort of losing relevancy as we speak, and this album sort of is cementing him under the dirt at this point. I think it's proof of that, but yeah, the publications still feel the need to include him on his albums, on the albums list. But why, I don't know. It's not a very good album. I don't get it. Yeah, no. Next, Princess Nokia, or Nokia, as I pronounced it, but I think it is actually Princess Nokia. Yeah, this was one of my most negative reviews of the year. I gave this an E. I don't give E's and F's out that often, but this was one of like the five, six or seven albums this in 2017 that I gave that grade two. I thought this was really bad. I don't see anything in Princess Nokia that's that interesting. There are some terrible hooks on this album. Some really redundant hooks. I'm different, I'm different, I'm different, I'm different, I'm different, I'm different. As a rapper, she doesn't have anything interesting to say. The beats are pretty standard. You could hear this on any SoundCloud album. I don't know, man. I've seen this get so much attention and hype. I heard this and thought most people wouldn't enjoy it because, again, it's just standard, boring, trappy rap music that's got a New York flair to it, but it's from a rapper that doesn't really showcase anything new to say. And usually that's what happens in hip hop. When the critics come through with their year end lists, they usually find these rappers that have something unique and have an edge about them. But this is one of those cases where I'm just like, what? Like, this is actually not a good album, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I didn't see anything in this. Just go listen to Rhapsody's album. You know, that's way better than this. She has way more interesting things to say. The production is miles better than this. Yeah, Princess Nokia, I don't know. Let's see what happens in the future. Maybe she'll change my mind. But as of now, I'm not seeing this at all. And finally, probably the album out of this list that I like the most. This is definitely the best of the bunch. And even from my other 5 overrated albums list, I would put this at the top of the list. But still, I thought this was a good album, but I'm not really sure if it's a great, great album that everyone is calling it. And that is Lord's Melodrama. Look, you know, I like this a lot. I did think there were some amazing songs on here, like Liability. Green Light made my best songs of the year list. I think Sober is a pretty cool, interesting track. The closing track was a nice high point for the album. A very Bleachers sounding song. I think Jack Antonoff had production on there. Homemade Dynamite was a pretty cool song too. I liked that a lot when it came out. It did wear on me a bit though. It's got that nostalgic 2000s sound to it, which I think Rina Sawayama ended up doing a bit better on her EP, to be honest. And the rest of the tracks didn't really do much for me. I thought the Louvre had a terrible chorus. I still think that. Boom, boom, boom. I always like imitate that one in front of my friends because they love this album, so I always like take the piss when they talk about Lord and do that chorus. It's kind of fun. And then Rider in the Dark had a very Kate Bush influence on it. Sober Part 2 was pretty boring. Supercut was a very generic, stale pop song. There was just a lot of influences coming from this Lord album, I think, this time around. There were like she was taking influence from like older artists and also like her contemporaries with tracks like Greenlight. It had that very pop sound to it. And Hard Feelings had this really like experimental instrumental, but I kind of thought it was a bit of an earache of a sound, and then it transitioned into Loveless, which was an okay transition. I do think Loveless was definitely the better half of that song. But there were too many weak moments for me to call this album amazing or an album that I could genuinely fall in love with, because at best it was really high, like really, really high. Some of the best pop moments of the year, bar none. But then everything else was kind of just like mid, you know? It was like good pop music, but it wasn't quite like the heights of everyone else was saying, in my opinion. I just think it wasn't quite as strong as what we were led to believe. A good album, like a very solid album, but just overrated, because I think when Pure Heroin came out, most people just saw Pure Heroin as a decent album with great singles on it, but I always saw it as like an amazing album, like a very fresh album for pop music. Like there was nothing out there that sounded anything like it. Whereas I think Melodrama is less fresh. It's more accessible in its sound, and it's got some really good lyrical themes running across it. But just the sound of the album just didn't grab me the same way, because it does sound like a lot of other music that's come out already. Whereas Pure Heroin just sounded completely new and just different to everything else, and actually paved the way for a lot of newer artists to come through, like Tove Lo, kind of like Charlie XCX, you could say as well. Alessia Cara, you know, like Lord really did influence a lot of artists on that album. I don't feel I got that same impact listening to this one. A very good album for sure, just not really best of the year material for me. But that's just my opinion, I suppose. Let me know your thoughts on these albums, if you think they are as good as they have been hyped up to be, if you think they are worse, if you think I am wrong about my opinions here. Let me know what you think. And subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, more reviews. Let me know some overrated albums you think that came out in 2017. I will link the other overrated albums list I did earlier in December in the description and all that stuff. And have a good day, have a good day, have a good day.